Welcome to the Education Insights Focus on Behavior podcast. We're here to talk about all things behavior in the world of education. We take the science of behavior and break it down for educators into easily implementable steps, and we're excited to spend some time with you. Get ready to talk through behavior, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can all improve our work in schools so we as educators can be more fulfilled and our students can be more successful.
Welcome back to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel Irwin. Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
And Dr. Daria Lorio-Barston. Hi, Daria.
Hi, everyone.
And as always, we're happy to have our producer, Emily Muse. Hi, Emily.
Hello there.
So I wanted to start today by asking you all, what is something that you think probably most people find reinforcing, but you're like, no, I don't find it reinforcing. I don't want it. If you give it to me, it's probably going to really discourage my behavior. I'm not in the normal curve here.
I'm going to say massages.
My husband is totally with you. He does not like those at all.
I had one time and it was fine, but it was not worth to me the money or the extreme feeling of extreme is the wrong word. There was some anxiety and not knowing what to expect, and then the whole thing. And then it's just a stranger. It's not for me. PT though is wonderful, and that I feel a lot better about, because when you've got something like wrong with your shoulder or your back or whatever, and they like get in there, punch out the knots, give you some exercises to do, like that I'm on board with. But the whole massage thing, same thing with like someone else washing my hair. No, thank you. No,
So
thank you.
I have questions. Your physical therapist is punching your knots?
No, but she was using her elbow in my back, and it was just, there was such a sense of relief afterwards. And then, the exercises they give you and that kind of thing, like it was remarkable.
Okay. Daria?
I cannot follow that
I know.
because I was unprepared for Daniel's answer. I am fascinated by that because I definitely am like on the other side of the spectrum, right? Like massages are incredibly reinforcing to me. So I think my brain is a little bit on pause, just taking this in and taking in that perspective.
All right. Well, we'll give you a second to think and
Thank you.
unpause. Emily, do you want to share one?
Sure. So mine, I don't know if other people find it reinforcing, but they're definitely like way more into it than I am and ever have been. Groundhog Day, do not like it. Don't like it as a concept, as a cutesy thing to observe and celebrate. And I mean, even as a teacher, I was like, why are we doing this? What's the fun to be had here? And I've never understood it. And yeah, Groundhog Day. I don't like it.
That is a hot take, man.
I'm with
I
Emily
am
on
not
this one,
sure.
though.
People are going to be writing in about that one.
Taking all comers, feel free.
Selena, what about you?
Well, my easy answer to this is coffee, because I just don't enjoy coffee and most people do. But I'm trying to think if there's other. I actually would say certain social situations. Like there are definitely social situations that I think most people enjoy that especially if I have to go someplace where I don't know a lot of the people, I definitely have this moment of like, how long do I have to stay before I can leave? Um, yeah, it's a lot of thought process sometimes.
Yeah, I think mine is just more I don't even know if it is that unique. Sodas don't do anything for me. I know people love sodas. I know people like live for a Diet Coke or a Diet Dr. Pepper or Dr. Pepper. It's just it's not my poison, right? And so that's one of those things where I know kids get really excited about it at like a party and those kind of things. That's definitely not a reinforcer for me. In fact, I would say kind of the opposite. But yeah, however, it's not nearly as exciting or interesting as responses to massages or Groundhog Day celebrations.
I know I'm feeling like we're kind of boring here, but as we can see from this, I think all of us are in slightly different camps on each of these topics, which is totally normal, right? There are lots of things that some people find reinforcing that other people don't. And that's what makes us all our own unique individuals. Of course, this ties into today. This is the same for our students. And we've talked about reinforcement on previous episodes. So I definitely encourage our listeners to go back to those previous episodes. So since we've talked about reinforcement before, I think the other side of this coin is punishment, of course. And I want to take a second to just talk about what punishment really is. So does anyone want to take a stab at a definition?
Punishment is really anything that happens in an environment that, when it follows a specific behavior, makes that behavior less likely to occur in the future. And I think we've talked about in earlier episodes about how we may inadvertently reinforce individuals by thinking we're punishing them. But really, punishment is a result of what happens to that behavior or how frequently that behavior happens again in the future. As opposed to what we think we might be doing to correct behavior.
Thank you, Daniel. And I think there's a couple pieces that are really important. There's no real value statement around punishment. It just means that when something happens, we're less likely to see that behavior again in the future. But there are some consequences to punishment that we don't always want to see. And so punishment is not our initial go-to intervention by any means, which is why we spend so much time talking about reinforcement. But I think, unfortunately, sometimes we do things in classrooms that inadvertently punish students. So it's not our intent, but then we don't see the results that we want to see.
I think a lot of times, right, we think we're doing one thing, but it's the other effect. And the same thing with reinforcement. We might be thinking we are doing something that would be super reinforcing to students, but as our chat at the beginning of the episode indicates, it can have quite a opposite effect.
Yeah, so the example that comes right to the top of my mind of this is, a student does a really good job on a project, and the teacher says, "I am so excited, you did such a great job. Let's post it to the wall so everyone can see it." And for a lot of kids, that is really reinforcing. Wow, my work's up there, everybody can see it, they can tell me how great it is. But for some students, they're like, "Oh my gosh, now I'm feeling like all this anxiety. I don't want that." And so what can happen is on the next assignment, the student's like, well, if I don't do as good, then they won't do that again. And so we've inadvertently decreased their behavior and punished them when we meant to do something really reinforcing.
I think an office shout out is similar to that, right? A lot of times we have really great recognition programs, and we celebrate students for one reason or the other. And generally, students are called to get to the office, their name is announced on the announcements. And for most students, this is terrific, except for students who do not appreciate attention and who really don't like it, and who very similarly their experiences are not going to be aligned to reinforcement.
So I actually have a real life example. So one of my kid's school has this book vending machine, and kids engaged in certain behaviors, they can earn a chance to get a coin to put in the vending machine, and then they can get a book, which all sounds really great. And actually, my children are really reinforced by books. This is super cool. And so my youngest happened to be picked, got the coin, went down, and was very upset that none of the books in the vending machine were any of the books that he wanted. He either already had them, they were too young for him, they weren't exciting, and he actually gave back the coin and said, "No, thank you." Which I feel really bad about because it was this very exciting thing that was supposed to be really reinforcing. And unfortunately, just because of a lot of circumstances, inadvertently, it wasn't. And then he wasn't that excited about the book vending machine anymore.
Which I think, to make the point, right? I think the book vending machines are terrific. I think recognitions and public recognitions for students are terrific. I think the tricky part becomes knowing your students to recognize who are going to find these things reinforcing and who aren't. And those students that don't find the kind of typical reinforcement systems reinforcing, then what are additional things that we can do instead, right? This is where students' voice and choice as always becomes really, really important, because I even think about, as teachers, we tend, well, not just as teachers, but as humans, we tend to see things through our own lens, right? But I know that what I think is reinforcing and what my own kiddo finds reinforcing could be completely different things.
So, what do we do about this? How do we identify it? And then how do we rectify it if it's happening?
I think just to kind of follow up on that last point being made, the idea that we think we kind of know what people are going to like in general. And really, I think another example of this is sort of that idea that, and I think we see it in workplaces a lot, that people who are good at what they do are tasked with more responsibility. And so that happens in a classroom too. If someone's, excelling with the work and doing the things and following all the things, it may be that public praise, but it also may be, oh, now you're a group leader. While this person doesn't necessarily want to take on a leadership role and be responsible for other people, what seems like an honor or something that is kind of a big deal may not make that person want to kind of go the extra mile or whatever the next time. Um, and the other thing I think too that happens is thinking about inadvertent punishment when we look at these group contingencies that may, if not designed well, end up punishing kids for who are doing the right thing because of the actions of a few. That can be a really tricky line, and that the kids who are on task and doing the things, and then everybody loses whatever it was, Free Friday or whatever the thing is, because one or two kids were yelling out or whatever, the situation is. Um, what's the point of the kids doing it the next time, right? Like I did the right thing, and now because of circumstances outside of my control, I'm being punished by not getting these things that I wanted to do in the first place. So you asked, what do we do about it? One, collective punishment maybe isn't the best thing to start with. Um, Two, Daria, I think Daria mentioned it, like figuring out what our kids actually like, right? Like ask them, see how they respond to little things like praise in front of the class. If they shy away from that, then maybe we don't want to put them on the school wide podium or make them get up in front of the class and make a speech or whatever. Um, so really kind of getting dialed into that. And yeah, that's it for now. That's it for now.
So, I really love, Daniel, that you said that collective punishment is generally always a pretty terrible idea, right? Because of the consequences that it has for students who were doing the right thing, and then they lost whatever privilege everybody else lost. And as a result, I'm not sure that they're gonna really be trying to work really hard in the future given that the behavior that they engaged in led to the loss of privilege. Anyway, I think we have to also be really, really careful with individual punishment as well. Because I think that the hard part for me about punishment is all the consequences that come with it, right? And even though behavioralistically speaking, it's certainly not a value laden term, but I think the way we see it in school sometimes, punishment procedures tend to come at a cost of positive relationship, at a cost of trust, at a cost of students having increased anxiety, right? Or a lot of times the instructional piece is lost altogether where we tell kids, no, don't do this because you did this. Here's the consequence. But that piece of, well, what do you do instead? That whole lesson about replacement behavior is missing, right? This is the same thing of when we tell kids, like, don't talk to your neighbor. Well, okay, but I can whisper because you didn't say I couldn't, those little things. And so I
Daria,
think,
and I just want to like really
sure.
emphasize that point. Punishment doesn't teach kids what to do. At best, it might teach them what not to do, but to your point, it may not even do that.
Right, right. And so I think generally for me, personal opinion, as Daria Lori Barson, punishment comes with too high of a cost to a relationship, and it opens up to doing the procedure that is scientifically sound, but kind of doing it all wrong. And I also know that a lot of times when people do try to do a punishment procedure, they tend to do it when their emotions are already high. And it goes away from being a scientific approach and one of the strategies that you can do. And instead, it becomes something completely different, right? So I think there are so many risks with punishment that we really have to think about when is it really appropriate in a class setting?
And I think, kind of to come back around to where I think there are those instances where there is a reaction needed or action needs to be taken. And a lot of times it's viewed as, the students getting a consequence or whatever, right? And so we see those times where correction is needed. Correction also has to include what are you supposed to do next time? What are we looking for? I do think too, there's other ways that like we kind of inadvertently whether we think we are or not. And one of these is, and I keep thinking about a kid that I worked with a few years ago who had one-to-one assistance. And it's just sort of this help that's there with the intention of we're here to help you and support you do these things, be to help you be independent, to help you get your work done, to help you manage your behavior, all of that. Um, but in a lot of ways, that can be a very punishing experience for kids if they don't sort of know, right? It's coming to school, it's having an adult with you, it singles you out as being different. So while the intention is there to be something that is supporting, something that is there to help the student be successful, the student's perception of that may not align with sort of the intentions of the adults who are trying to support them. And so making school maybe a less reinforcing experience and inadvertently, maybe not specific behaviors being punished, but maybe the whole idea of school and learning, because there's this person, this entity that's kind of following me around and sort of lowering the level of satisfaction and reinforcement that I'm getting in general. Sort of those little moments that are happening throughout the day may be diminished quite a bit.
So I think the other question I want to go back to is how do we identify when this could be happening? What are some of those red flags?
You can ask. I mean, I think that's like the easiest thing, right? Like so we tried this thing and you ask the kid, like, did you like that? Right? Just pull them aside and have a proper conversation. Like, hey, do you like that kind of being called out in front of the class, or do you appreciate having these other opportunities to be a leader? Like, is that a thing you're interested in doing? One, and two, it's a bit harder to do unless you're really sort of unless things are going really well all the time as far as sort of how routine and similar things are. But like, what's the pattern of behavior over time? So you might see a change in behavior kind of immediately, but over time, after a week or two of trying something, and you're seeing less student participation, you're seeing less participation by one student, or you're seeing less interaction, you're seeing less of whatever it is you thought you were trying to see more of. That's kind of your cue to say, okay, something has to be adjusted here. Whether it's how I'm delivering the reinforcement, whether it's changing expectation, something in that equation kind of has to be reevaluated to see why it's not working the way you want it to.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say, one is ask and two is observe, right? Because if you are not seeing the change that you wanted to see, if the behavior is not improving, if the behavior is not increasing, then you may think you selected that reinforcer, and you probably did. You just selected somebody else's reinforcer, not that particular kid's, right? And so a lot of times, I think it's very common for us to try a strategy, particularly the one with reinforcement, and then not see a behavior change or not see the behavior change in the direction we want it to go. And people tend to be quick to say, well, see, reinforcement isn't working, right? When reinforcement always works as a strategy. It absolutely, this is how we function in life. Our behavior continues to happen because of reinforcement. It just, if we believe it's not working, it's because we messed up the fidelity of reinforcement procedure somewhere or other. Either we didn't pick the right one, or maybe it's not strong enough, or maybe our timing is completely off, or maybe the kids are very unclear about the connection that this is the behavior that gets this access to this specific reinforcement. So I think it's really important for us to be thoughtful about how it is that we are administering reinforcement. And if you're not sure, we have shared some great resources in the previous episodes around reinforcement as well. But I think my biggest takeaway is if you believe that reinforcement is not working, take another look at it because reinforcement works. It just may be something within our plan that's a little bit off.
Yeah, I think you all make some good points. Asking is great, observing. And then to your point, if what you're doing isn't yielding the result that you want it to, then it's time to take a look at what we're doing and making sure that it is what it's what we mean to do and it's working and it's got all the pieces and those kinds of things. So,
Well, and Selena, if we can return to your question of, so what do we do, right? I think this is a good thing for us to talk about as well, because we generally do a great job with asking students what they like at the beginning of the school year when we're doing the get to know you activities and those kind of things. But I think that there is a bigger piece of kind of continuing to build those relationships and continue finding ways to work in choice into our existing reinforcement systems. So I think about the pretty standard practice in a PBIS school, particularly like at elementary schools, is the school store, where after you have earned so many tokens, points, bucks, choose your currency here, you get to go and you get to select something based on the amount of the tokens that you have gotten. And what I would love to see in the world is having more items that kids can access that are non-tangible, right? Because I think sometimes the school store kind of loses the new shine of it. Or to your earlier points, students don't find what it is that they really like or that they really want. And then the system really doesn't work. But if we can have almost like a menu of choices for students to choose from. If we can have a pathway for students to pitch their ideas as to kind of things they'd like to see at the store or whatever the reinforcement system, once we're having that dialogue, then we are able to offer some things that we may never know that is reinforcing to students. I remember having a kiddo who would do right about anything for playing chess with me during lunch, which is not a reinforcer that would be meaningful to most anybody else in the classroom when I taught elementary. But for this particular student, this was the one thing that he really, really wanted to do. And so I think it's important to ask and to create a pathway for students to be able to request things that work for them.
yeah, and it's so the what is the what is the reinforcer is definitely one question that you need to ask yourself. And then, as you alluded to, the other questions are how often is reinforcement happening? Is the reinforcer strong enough? There's things I like, but if you're going to ask me to do something really hard, I don't like it that much, you know? And then, so the what, the how often, and how close to the behavior. Right. Because I think that's the other thing is sometimes kids do things that we are really excited that they're doing. They're doing a great job. And then that reinforcement doesn't come until much later. And sometimes the length of time between when the behavior occurred and when reinforcement is actually delivered, this is why grades aren't actually reinforcing for a lot of kids because, okay, I did that assignment like 4 weeks ago, but I don't get my grade until the end of the 9 weeks. And so it's just too far away to make a change in behavior. So I think those are the areas that I would definitely start looking at first. If you're sitting there, start scratching your head and saying, I feel like we tried positive reinforcement and I don't feel like it's working. Those are the things to really start thinking about is what is the reinforcer? How often are they getting it? Is it strong enough? And, how soon is reinforcement delivered?
Well, and another good thing to do is to observe your students if there's ever any downtime in the classroom, right? What is it that they are engaging in during that time? When having a morsel of unstructured time, what is it that students are doing with that? And that's a pretty good indicator as far as what might be driving their behavior, what might be things that they are really interested in. And I worry that a lot of times people immediately jump to like candy or stickers, right? And while it can be reinforcing sometimes, I think there are so many more potent and more meaningful and potentially more natural reinforcers that we should consider. But we won't know unless we are observing, unless we're building those relationships, unless we're asking students directly and asking their families and community members as well.
All right. I think that's a really great place to wrap this one up. That takes us to our unpaid ad or our resource for the episode. And I think, Daria, you're going to share that with us.
I sure will. So there is a new practice brief from Center on PBIS, and it is called Tier 1 Student Reinforcement Systems. It's a fairly short read, but what I really appreciate about this practice brief is that if you are hearing this conversation and if you're thinking, okay, thanks, Daniel, Daria, and Selena, and Emily, but this is a little bit clear as mud, right? This is a lovely practice brief that structures and kind of gives you that conceptual knowledge about reinforcement and invites you to consider what can an effective universal system of reinforcement look like in your context. So I would highly recommend that as a read.
Well, thank you. And we will definitely link that in the show notes. And that wraps us up. So, Daria, thank you for your time and information today.
Happy to be here.
Daniel, always contributions are welcome and appreciated.
Thanks so much.
Emily, thank you for all you do.
My pleasure.
And
And
to our
Selena,
listeners,
right back at you. Thank you as well for keeping us on topic.
I try. So with that, we will see our listeners on the next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can join the conversation by emailing us at cebis@odu.edu, visiting www.cebisva.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky at CebisVA. Special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for their support of this project.